Every anime fan knows that One Piece is a long, long, long series, and because of that, there is such a deep, rich history of characters throughout all 1200 episodes. But because One Piece has entered its final saga, with the ultimate climax slowly creeping up in both the anime and the manga, it leaves a ton of people with one large question. Which beloved characters are coming back into One Piece? Today, I've selected 5 characters that I think will potentially be coming back into One Piece, and I've categorized them by percentage chance to reappear in the story, starting with the lowest at 20%, then increasing by intervals of 20% all the way to 100%, meaning yes, I do think there is a character that is 100% certain to return to the story. The reason I don't have any 0% on this list is because I genuinely think any One Piece character could make a return in the story because Oda is absolutely unpredictable. But if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below what you think of my 5 picks, or if there's any other characters that you would have included in this video. A character that I think has around a 20% chance to return to One Piece is Enel. Now, I absolutely know there's going to be a lot of people mad at this 20% pick, because I know a lot of people believe Enel is certainly coming back into One Piece, but let me explain why I have him at 20%. I loved Enel as a villain in Skypiea. He was one of the first One Piece villains who had a ton of power at their side, and also felt really smart to match their sort of god complex. You don't really get characters like that often that are extremely smart and also sort of delusional. But I think the purpose that Enel served for the story is sort of an example of what a godlike figure in One Piece would look like, or an extremely early parallel of what Imu will be in the final saga. So to have Enel, who is just a premature and unfinished version of Imu, return to the story, it wouldn't really make any sense because they would just fit in as this eccentric final villain character who doesn't really serve a side character role. That being said, the reason I have Enel at 20% and not anything lower is because Enel's lore with the Moon People is actually extremely interesting in his cover story, and while it's unclear if Oda really wants to do anything with this plotline, if this race of people and the Land of the Moon have anything to do with the ancient history of One Piece, which could definitely be possible considering the moon makes an appearance on the legendary mural panel, then Enel would have a purpose returning to the story. I also think a lot of people are sour with Enel's level of strength. He appeared in the story way ahead of his time. His Devil Fruit is so incredibly powerful, so I think people want to see him in sort of a stronger context, a One Piece where Haki is extremely established, because back when Enel was absolutely destroying everyone on Skypiea, the entire structure of One Piece's power system wasn't exactly created yet, so a lot of people think Oda was doing the man a disservice. Next, with a slightly higher chance to return at 40%, I have Kaido. When I said Enel was not going to return because he has such a main villain energy that he wouldn't serve his purpose as a side character, I sort of feel the exact same for Kaido, but rather than his energy being the source of that disbelief, I feel like the strength is a real problem here. A character like Kaido coming back into the story would throw a wrench into everything. The amount of power required to take down Kaido and the implications that his rule had on the world of One Piece was so large that his return would become a massive distraction for the advancements of the future of the Final War. Not only do I have trouble fitting Kaido into this gigantic puzzle that is the Final War, I also think it's very likely that he's just straight up dead. I know that Oda does not like to kill off characters, and that the result of Luffy and Kaido's fight is ambiguous considering we never got to see Kaido's body after the volcano erupted, so I really cannot pinpoint if Kaido is actually alive at this point in time. However, despite all this, the reason I have him at 20% higher than Enel here is because he actually has already technically re-entered the story via a flashback, the Rocks flashback in the current manga. I should mention now that for the sake of this video, I do not count that as returning to the story. When I say return to the story, I mean returning to the present day One Piece. But because Kaido seems to have a larger involvement with the Rocks Pirates and God Valley, things that Oda has not showed us yet, and those things have a large implication on the future of One Piece, it is possible that Kaido does make a return, which is why I have him slightly higher than Enel, but I still would bet him under 50%. Speaking of Kaido, Wano, and the Rocks Pirates, at 60%, I have Big Mom. Now, I know some of you are immediately thinking, Kaido and Big Mom have the same amount of chance to return. How come you have Big Mom above Kaido? That's not really fair. Well, let me explain. While yes, everything I said about Kaido is true for Big Mom, the fact that Big Mom's return would be hard to fit into the final story, her death was ambiguous, and that she might have a connection to the Rocks Pirates in the future, I do think there is something explicitly different about the way Oda chose to send out Big Mom compared to Kaido. Kaido was completely and utterly defeated. He was knocked out by Luffy with Luffy's greatest punch of all time, and we clearly see Kaido floating in the lava at the end of this fight. But Big Mom's fate was different. Not only did Kid and Law get a little bit lucky defeating Big Mom because the bombs on the bottom of Onigashima helped defeat her, Oda also explicitly chose to have Big Mom's final line in the present day story be, "Don't expect this to finish me off." If you ask me, there is absolutely reason for this dialogue choice. I don't think Oda would have Big Mom say this at all if he had no plans to make her return into the story. And I know people might not like to hear it because Big Mom is not exactly a fan favorite character. There's actually a lot more evidence to why Big Mom's going to return to the story. Not only was she part of the Rocks Pirates, which was a big reason why I gave Kaido 40% in the first place, the Straw Hats are currently on Elbaf, which we know Big Mom has a ton of ties to. I could go on for an entire video about the ties that Big Mom has to Elbaf, but instead of doing that in this video, I've actually already done that. Check out this video on why I think Big Mom will return to Elbaf. You'll get a lot of a bigger picture as to why I have her at 60% in this video. Building off of Big Mom, at 80%, I have Katakuri. Yes, that's right, I think Katakuri is the most likely member of the Big Mom Pirates to make a reappearance in the story, more so than his captain and mother Big Mom. Similar to what I was saying about Big Mom's final line of dialogue, I have the same sentiment for Luffy and Katakuri's farewell, where Katakuri asks Luffy if he'll be back to take on Big Mom. Luffy tells him of course, she's a Yonko after all, and Katakuri finally goes down. Now, I understand that this interaction is sort of muddied by the fact that Big Mom was technically already defeated. However, considering Katakuri is such a fan favorite character, his dynamic with Luffy is so interesting, and also the fact that he wasn't present at Wano when the Big Mom Pirates were kicked off of the island by Marco, makes me feel like Katakuri does have a little bit more of an important role in the future of the story than Big Mom, which is interesting because he wasn't as much of a main antagonist as she was. And if you ask me where this involvement will take place, I would definitely say it has to do with the kidnapping of Pudding by the Blackbeard Pirates. Whereas Big Mom's return would be something akin to a lore-based return where she washes up on the shores of Elbaf and gives us exposition on the Rocks Pirates, I think Katakuri would have a way more action-based involvement in the future of One Piece, potentially being part of the crew that goes to rescue Pudding from the Blackbeard Pirates, or maybe he'll potentially even be present at the final war, acting as a force as a teammate with Luffy to take down Blackbeard, considering they would have a common enemy. I just think Katakuri is way too cool, way too fan favorite, way too tied to the narrative, with explicit dialogue stating he'll come back into the story, for him to not come back at all. The only reason I have Katakuri at 80% and not 100% is because it seems that his involvement in the narrative would be loosely separated from the main plotline, and it would be a lot for Oda to include all of these characters in the final war, so there is a chance that he just gets scratched for Oda to focus on the main characters of the story. Which brings me to my 100% pick. There is a 0% chance that this character does not return in the main plotline of One Piece, and there is a 0% chance that this character does not meet our Straw Hats within the next, let's say, 100 chapters. That is, of course, Nefertari Vivi. Most of you probably expected this pick, but if you didn't expect it, let me explain why this is the absolute home run pick of the century. First, let me get it out of the way that yes, Vivi has technically been reoccurring in the story since her main plotline involvement in Alabasta, but when I say Vivi has a 100% chance to return, I mean that she will 100% return to the forefront of One Piece, becoming a main character with the likes of the other Straw Hats. The first reason for this is that her father's death in the throne room is one of the main plot points that pushed us towards the final war within the last 200 chapters, and Alabasta's significance, as well as Lily's significance in the ancient history of One Piece and the events that went down in the Void Century, are so important that it seems impossible for Vivi to not come back into the story. This scene even tied together why Imu was holding Vivi's poster in the first place. Vivi was always meant to have such an incredibly important role towards the end of One Piece, and now we know that it's because of Alabasta's history. Not only that, we now know that because Vivi is with Morgans, she has the ability to cash in on joining the Straw Hats, the opportunity she gave up such a long time ago. This farewell has set up Vivi to join the Straw Hats for such a long time, and now that Vivi knows the world is in danger and her father is dead, it is time for her to come join the Straw Hats on their journey to liberate the world. This just makes sense in so many ways because Vivi's involvement has been thrust into the story. It only makes sense for her to go and join the crew that is going to end this regime, the same occupational force that destroyed the Alabasta Queen of the past. And Oda is already setting up for this. We see that because Vivi is with Morgans, she has Morgans put an X on Luffy's poster here in the paper in order to send a signal to these Straw Hats that she is looking to mate up with them, because of course this is the X that they all put on their arms in order to fight against Mr. 2, Bon Clay. There is seriously so much tying Vivi to the main plot of the story, and Oda is already gearing up for her return. As we continue to crawl closer and closer to this final fight against the world government, Vivi's fate is absolutely undeniable that she's going to join the Straw Hats and become a major player for the fight against Imu, considering it is all tied to her lineage and her history. Those are my 5 picks for the characters with different percentage chances to come back into the story. Thank you for watching this video all the way through. Let me know what you think of my 5 picks, if you would shuffle around their percentages, or if you have any different picks that you would include in this video, let me know in the comments. I'm really curious who you think is going to make it into One Piece by the end of the story. Thanks for watching, and until next time.